She gave her son up for adoption and now wants money every week. I feel like an ATM and I can't take it anymore. $25. That is the number sitting in the middle of this whole situation. $25 for an Uber to a doctor's appointment. And this woman is texting multiple times a day, tone getting sharper with every message, telling her that if she does not send the money right now, the appointment is getting cancelled. And the person on the receiving end of all of this is sitting there feeling like the worst human being alive for even hesitating. She is a doctor. She adopted this woman's son. She has spent years building a relationship, sending gifts, showing up, and quietly handing over money whenever things got tight. And somehow, after all of that, she is still the one feeling guilty. Let me back up and tell you the whole thing, because this story has layers that you genuinely need to understand before you can form an opinion on it. There is history here, and history matters. So our narrator and her husband adopted 2 children. Their youngest son, 15 years old now, was born right in their hometown. Because of that proximity, they were able to maintain what is called an open adoption, meaning the birth family stays in the picture. They see Mary, the birth mother, 4 or 5 times a year. They get her gifts for her birthday, for Christmas, for Mother's Day. They have treated this woman like an extended member of the family for over a decade. Think about what that actually looks like in practice. It means Mary has had a seat at the table for birthday dinners and holiday gatherings. It means their son has grown up knowing where he came from, knowing the face of the woman who brought him into the world, having a name and a story instead of a blank space. And by all accounts, for a long time, things were genuinely good between them. Mary got to watch her son grow up. She had a real relationship with him, not a formal or distant one but a warm and present one. The family made space for her in a way that a lot of adoptive families simply do not, and that generosity of spirit ran in both directions for years. Now here is where things start to shift. When their son was younger, our narrator and her husband were not wealthy at all. Her husband is a teacher. She was staying home with the kids. They were living modestly, carefully, counting what came in and what went out the way a lot of young families do, watching the budget, saying no to things they wanted because the math did not allow for it. But then she went back to school. 8 years of school. 8 years of early mornings and late nights and studying while the kids were asleep and pushing through the exhaustion because she had a goal and she was not going to let go of it. She became a doctor. And with that came a better income, a nicer house, a more comfortable life. The kind of shift that is visible from the outside. And apparently, when Mary came over to the new house for the first time and looked around at what had changed, something shifted behind her eyes. Because that is when the asking started. The first request was $150 to keep the power from getting shut off. Seems reasonable on the surface, right? A utility shutoff is a real crisis. It affects everything: the refrigerator, the heat, the ability to charge a phone. Our narrator did not hesitate, but she was careful. She called the power company directly to pay it, which was a smart and kind instinct, paying at the source so she knew the money went exactly where it was supposed to go. Except when she called, she found out the actual balance owed was over $450. The $150 was just the minimum to avoid immediate shutoff. So she paid the full balance, all $450, without making a scene about it or going back to Mary to point out the gap. And I want you to hold on to that detail, because it tells you something important about how these requests were being framed from the very beginning. The number being asked for was not the number that was actually needed. And our narrator, being the kind of person she is, filled in the difference quietly and asked for nothing in return. After that, the requests started coming every other month or so. Small amounts, manageable things, and because they could afford it, she paid without much deliberation. She did not want to make Mary feel small for asking. She did not want money to become the thing that damaged a relationship she had worked so hard to build. But then the frequency picked up. The amounts varied. And eventually they sat Mary down and had a gentle but direct conversation. They said, "We will give you $50 a month, that is our limit, And we need to draw a line here because this is starting to affect the relationship, and the last thing we want is for that to happen. It was an attempt to find a middle ground, a way to keep helping without letting the helping become the entire foundation of things. Mary said she understood. She nodded. She seemed to receive it. Things cooled down for a while, and there was probably relief on both sides, a sense that they had found a workable arrangement. But cooling down is not the same as stopping. The requests came back. $10 for an Uber to the doctor. $20 for a water bill. $15 for medication. All of it framed around basic necessities, which is the most psychologically difficult kind of request to say no to, because saying no feels like you are denying someone food or medicine or a way to get to a doctor. It does not feel like enforcing a boundary. It feels like cruelty, even when it is not. And our narrator, being the kind of person she clearly is, sent the money each time. Because she felt guilty. Because she could afford it. Because the word no stuck in her throat every single time she opened the text, read the request, and tried to imagine typing a response that was not yes. I want to pause here and just say, the guilt this woman is carrying is enormous. And I understand it. I really do. She has this woman's child. She is living in a nice house with a good income, going to work every day and coming home to a life that is comfortable and full. And Mary is on disability, struggling month to month, reaching out every few weeks because her basic needs are not being met by the systems that are supposed to catch people in her situation. That is a heavy thing to sit with. It is the kind of weight that does not go away when you close the app or put down the phone. It follows you into the kitchen while you are making dinner, and it is there when you wake up in the morning. It would make almost anyone feel like they owe something, like the least they can do is help. But here is what started happening next. The requests stopped being occasional. They started being urgent. Immediate. She would get a text in the middle of the day saying there was a doctor's appointment starting in 30 minutes and she needed money for an Uber right now. Not tomorrow. Not later today. Right now. There was no lead time, no warning, no opportunity to think it over or check in with her husband. Just a message landing on her phone while she was probably seeing patients or finishing a chart, demanding an immediate response to an immediate crisis. And that shift from occasional need to constant emergency is worth paying attention to. Because it changed the entire dynamic of what was being asked. It was no longer, I am struggling and I could use your help. It had become, I need you to drop what you are doing and solve this for me right now. Our narrator tried ignoring the texts. That worked for a stretch, the quiet that follows when someone realizes the pressure is not producing results. But then this week happened. Multiple texts per day. $25 for an Uber. The tone getting more aggressive with each message, the words sharper, the implication harder to ignore. The implication being clear, if you do not send this money right now, I will have to cancel my appointment, and whatever happens after that is on you. Read that again. Whatever happens after that is on you. That is not just asking for help anymore. That is applying pressure. That is assigning responsibility. That is making someone else accountable for a situation they did not create, in a very deliberate and calculated way. Now I am not going to sit here and call Mary a villain. Our narrator herself, in her edit to the post, specifically asked people not to hate on Mary, and I respect that request deeply. Mary has had an incredibly hard life. Generational poverty is real, the kind that does not just affect your bank account but shapes the way you see the world, the options you believe are available to you, the strategies you learn to survive. Poor health is real. A system that makes it nearly impossible to climb out of financial hardship is real. None of that is nothing. And the fact that she placed a child for adoption, allowed him to grow up in a different home, and has maintained a respectful and present relationship with that family for 15 years says something meaningful about her as a person. That is not easy. That takes a kind of love that most people will never have to exercise. But good intentions and difficult circumstances do not erase the impact of a pattern. And what has developed here is absolutely a pattern. It started with a single request that was framed as smaller than it actually was. It grew into monthly payments. It paused when boundaries were set. It came back smaller and needier than before, slipping under the line that had been drawn. And now it has escalated into daily pressure texts with an aggressive edge. That is a cycle. And cycles like this one do not stop on their own. They only stop when someone decides the cycle is over and holds that decision steady even when it is uncomfortable. Here's the thing about Mary having 7 adult children and several siblings. Our narrator mentioned that specifically, and I do not think it was an accident. Because it means Mary has a support network. She is not completely alone in the world. She has people she is connected to, family she shares history with, individuals who could theoretically step in during a moment of need. But she is texting the adoptive mother of her son multiple times a day instead. And that tells you something important about where the path of least resistance has been established over time. Our narrator has become the person Mary goes to because our narrator always eventually says yes. Not immediately, sometimes, but eventually. And eventually is enough. What makes this genuinely hard is the emotional weight attached to the relationship. This is not a stranger asking for money. This is the woman whose child they are raising. Every time our narrator hesitates, every time she stares at that text and feels the familiar pull of guilt rising in her chest, she has to sit with the thought that she has something irreplaceable that Mary gave up. She gets to watch that boy do his homework and eat breakfast and grow taller and become a person. Mary gave that up. That creates a kind of obligation that is almost impossible to reason your way out of, because it is not about logic. It is about grief and gratitude and guilt all tangled together into something that does not have a clean answer. And Mary, whether consciously or not, exists at the very center of all of that. The resentment that our narrator mentioned is the most important signal in this entire story. She said it herself. She feels like an ATM. She feels resentful. And resentment is not a character flaw. It is not proof that she is selfish or ungrateful or does not understand Mary's circumstances. It is a sign that a boundary has been crossed repeatedly for long enough that the relationship itself is starting to corrode from the inside. If this continues, it will not just be about the money anymore. It will color every interaction, every visit, every holiday gathering. It will poison the actual relationship between their son and his birth mother, which is the exact opposite of what anyone in this story wants. So here is where I land on this. Our narrator is not an asshole. Not even close. She has been extraordinarily generous, not just with money but with access, with gifts, with presence, with the kind of open and sustained relationship that many birth mothers never get to have. She has given Mary something priceless by keeping her son in her life for 15 years. And she has repeatedly, quietly, tried to meet Mary's financial needs without making a big thing of it, without holding it over anyone's head, without asking for recognition or gratitude. The problem is not her generosity. The problem is that there has never been a consequence-free way to say no, and Mary has learned that. What needs to happen now is a clear, firm, final conversation. Not another soft boundary that leaves wiggle room for interpretation. A direct statement that says the financial support is over, completely, and that the relationship they value has to exist on its own terms without money attached to it. That is a hard conversation to have. It will probably be uncomfortable for everyone involved. But it is the only one that actually solves anything. Because as long as the door is even slightly open, the texts will keep coming. And the final thing I want to say is this. $50 a month, a paid power bill, Uber money, medication costs, water bills, that is not nothing. Over the years our narrator has given more than most people would ever dream of giving. She did it out of love, out of guilt, out of a genuine desire to help. And she deserves to feel good about that, not guilty about the moment she finally said enough. Enough is not abandonment. Enough is survival. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a relationship is protect it from the thing that is slowly killing it. I told my boyfriend about my miscarriage at 15 and he stormed out like I betrayed him somehow. She almost did not tell him at all. Not because she was hiding anything. Not because she was ashamed. But because the moment never felt right, and honestly, it was her story, her life, something that happened to her when she was 15 years old and already drowning in a situation no teenager should ever have to navigate. She carried it quietly, not as a secret, but as a chapter that had already been turned. And then she told him. And he blew up the whole room. That is where we are walking into. A relationship that was going well, a first serious relationship for her, 10 months in, first real fight, and suddenly she is the one being accused of lying and hiding and being a fundamentally different person than the one he thought he knew. Over something she experienced as a child. She grew up in what she describes as a chaotic home. The kind of home where the adults in the room were not really functioning as adults, where the usual guardrails of a safe childhood had already been worn down or removed entirely. At 15 she was in a relationship with someone significantly older than her, which is already a deeply troubling detail that deserves to be named clearly. A 15-year-old dating a much older person is not a normal situation. That is a child in a relationship with a power imbalance, a situation where the adult in that dynamic holds all the cards and the kid is just trying to survive it, trying to feel seen and wanted and chosen in an environment that probably did not give her much of that. She got pregnant. She had a miscarriage. And then life kept moving, as it does, and she did the hard and unglamorous work of getting far away from that version of her life, piece by piece, year by year. By her own account, she is proud of how far she has come. She is not haunted by this. She has processed it and integrated it into who she is without letting it define her, which is not a small thing. That takes real time and real effort and real courage, and the fact that she can talk about it at all without falling apart is evidence of serious personal strength. Now when she and her boyfriend started talking about having children someday, about pregnancy in the future and what that might look like for both of them, it felt like the right moment to share that part of her past. She was not trying to make it a big moment. She was not sitting him down for a serious confession with a prepared speech and a box of tissues on standby. She brought it up naturally, the way you do when a conversation opens a door and you decide to walk through it, in the context of a real conversation about real things. She trusted him enough to let him in. She made herself vulnerable in the way that healthy intimacy actually requires. And what she got back was fury. He yelled at her. He accused her of not trusting him. He called it a big secret she had been keeping, as if the word secret alone was enough to make her the villain of the story. He made it sound like she had been deliberately deceiving him for 10 months, like she had sat across from him at 100 dinners and conversations and quietly constructed a false version of herself and let him fall for it. He spoke to her as though discovering this information was a betrayal rather than a gift, as though her choosing this moment, this conversation, this level of comfort with him, was somehow proof that something was wrong with her rather than proof that she finally felt safe enough to be fully honest. He stormed out. He went completely silent, not answering texts, not answering calls, leaving her in that horrible suspended quiet where you cannot tell if the relationship is over or just paused and you have no power to find out. And then eventually he came back and said he was not angry anymore but needed time to process. I am sorry. I need to stop here for just a second. He needs time to process something that happened to her when she was 15. Something she did not choose. Something she survived. Her mother told her to be patient, that it was understandable for him to react strongly to something so drastic. And our narrator is sitting there feeling conflicted, because on one hand she gets that it is a lot of information to take in all at once, and on the other hand she is furious at the way he handled it and at the implication that she owed him this information before they even started dating. She is questioning herself. She is wondering if she did something wrong. And that is the part that really gets me, because she should not be sitting in doubt right now. She should not be the one carrying the weight of his reaction on top of the weight of her own history. Let me be really direct about what actually happened here. She shared a deeply personal piece of her history, one rooted in childhood trauma and a situation that no child should have been in, with the person she is in a relationship with. She shared it at a moment that felt appropriate and natural, during a conversation about the future they might build together. She did not lie. She did not hide. She made a private decision about the timing of a private story, which is something every single person in every single relationship does every single day. We all have things we share on our own schedule, in our own time, when we feel ready and safe. That is not deception. That is self-protection, and it is completely normal. And he responded by making her feel like a criminal. The framing that really bothers me is this idea that she kept a big secret and was not trusting him. That framing puts her in the wrong from the very first word. But here is what it ignores. A miscarriage she had as a 15-year-old is not information a person owes their partner before the relationship starts. It is not like hiding another serious relationship or an ongoing health condition that affects your partner directly. It is a piece of her personal history, her body, her pain, that belongs to her and her alone. She gets to decide when and whether to share it, and the fact that she chose to share it at all, in a context that made sense, in a moment of genuine openness, is a sign of trust, not a betrayal of it. What his reaction actually communicated, whether he meant it to or not, is that he felt entitled to her most painful memories on his own timeline. It communicated that her past, something she had no control over at 15, changed how he sees her. It communicated that his discomfort with the information was more important than her experience of living through it. It told her, without saying it directly, that his image of her mattered more to him than the reality of her. And that is a genuinely alarming set of signals to be getting 10 months into a first serious relationship. There is also something worth examining in the fact that he left and went silent rather than staying and working through it together. That is a shutdown response. It places all of the emotional labor on her, makes her wait, makes her wonder, makes her the one who has to sit in the discomfort while he takes time to decide how he feels about who she is. She is the one who shared something hard. She is the one who took the risk. And somehow she ended up being the one left behind, staring at her phone, waiting to find out if she is forgiven for a thing she never should have had to be forgiven for. And her mother validating that as a reasonable response, calling what happened to her drastic, adds another layer of discomfort to the whole thing. Here is my verdict, and I am not softening this. She is not the asshole. She is not even close to the asshole. She was a child in a dangerous situation. She experienced a pregnancy and a miscarriage at 15 years old with an older partner, which is a situation that required courage to survive and even more courage to eventually talk about. She has clearly done real work to get to a place where she can speak about it without being crushed by it. And she brought it to her boyfriend in an honest, vulnerable way during a relevant conversation. His reaction was not about her. His reaction was about his own discomfort, his own expectations, possibly his own insecurities about her past. And rather than sitting with those feelings privately and coming back to her with compassion and care, he exploded at her, stormed out, and gave her the silent treatment. That is not processing. That is punishing. And she is feeling guilty for something that is entirely on him. The question she needs to sit with now is not whether she was wrong to tell him this way. She was not. The question is what this reaction tells her about who he is and how he handles hard things. Because life does not get simpler than this. There will be harder conversations. There will be moments where she needs him to stay in the room even when staying is uncomfortable. And the first time she gave him the chance to do that, he walked out the door. That is the thing she actually needs to be thinking about. Not whether she owed him an earlier confession. But whether he is the kind of person who can love her fully, including every part of her story. Drop a comment below and tell me which one of these hit you harder today. And if you are new here, a like and a subscribe would genuinely mean a lot.